loneliness. It's I call it the quintessential effect of self-improvement that makes people quit. Reason why is because it, it really just, it slows down everything, right? It halts progress. It basically deteriorates your mental health and physical health, and it also puts you in a situation where you confine yourself to depression and loneliness and unproductive menial activities to try to help increase dopamine or to increase the feeling of importance, right? Which everyone does. And that's a good thing, because if everyone didn't try to become important, there wouldn't be important people, right? And those important people wouldn't be able to help you. So it's very important to have this ideology that loneliness is in fact something that we should take seriously on a self-improvement journey in general, because loneliness as a social construct, for instance, it puts you against everyone else on a literal level. And when you start to identify yourself as being lonely, you have to be very careful to make sure that you aren't trapping yourself by saying that you're lonely and therefore you can't actually make friends. When you get into that cycle, it gets into a really depressive trap that you can't actually get out of, because you're unwilling, you end up becoming unwilling to show your emotional personality, we'll say, and you end up not becoming able to make the friends because you reject them and have an antisocial aspect to your identity, which you probably don't want. So you get into this really nasty cycle of just trying to feel important, feeling isolated, having no one by you, trying to make friends, booting the friends out, feeling isolated. And you get into that really, like that, it's just, it really draws out what actually happens when you're lonely. And it can even go to the extent of beyond the mental aspect. And it's like talking about the dopamine I mentioned earlier. People often go to addictions or just of any kind, physical, mental, emotional, to try to conjure their vices, or conquer their problems. Sorry, in the short term, so that way they can at least feel better. But not in reality, they're fucking miserable. So it's important to realize that loneliness isn't just a mental problem. It causes you to become probably fatter. It causes you to become less mentally disciplined. It causes you to be less spiritually enlightened. It causes you to be less emotionally intelligent. These things combined often give somebody a feeling of less importance and loneliness, hence reinforcing that cycle. If you know anything about Jordan Peterson, you might have heard of something called positive reinforcement. And I believe he words it a bit differently, but I'm going to try to explain this idea in full detail to you. It's a positive reinforcement cycle. And what the cycle does is it gives you a positive feedback neurologically when you do something that makes you feel good, right? So when you're lonely and you binge eat, you feel good. That's a positive reinforcement loop, because it's telling you, okay, in order for you to feel good, you have to be lonely. Think about that. In order for you to feel good, you have to be lonely. That is a cynical, depressing, horrible trap that I do not want you to fall into. Do you understand? Because that right there is very hard to identify internally. I can say this to you, but to say this to myself is a much tougher task. To actually deep dive into yourself, to introspect, right? This is why in self-improvement there's always journaling, because the ability to introspect and identify your problems, it's such a major such a major factor to benefiting what you can be. But if you can't introspect, how are you supposed to identify your problems in the first place? How are you supposed to conquer your fears? right? Because you have to recognize introspectively, I have the tools to conquer my fears. But how do you conquer them if you can't recognize the tools, right? So that's the thing of loneliness too, is that loneliness brings you to an internal perspective and you aren't allowed to see, you basically disallow yourself for seeing any external sources that could tell you, okay, you're good at this thing, how about you do that thing? Or maybe you could help me with this thing, how about you help me with this thing? Okay? So it's very difficult. And I want you to avoid that cynical trap as much as possible so that way you can be a more free, better person for yourself and other people. And to go off of that, the reason why it's in self improvement as this specific niche is because when you're on a self improvement journey, per se, you often feel loneliness because of the habits that you do are very individualized most of the time. And they also, the social construct that we live in doesn't really allow people of the self improvement niche to meet up with each other in a way where it's high quality and developed without being seen as unsafe or scary, or you're going to get kidnapped, or someone's going to do really bad things to you, and you get that fear. But instead of fear of missing out, it's like fear of moving offline. I just made it up because I was trying to think about it, but it's kind of creative. But you get that idea of the pressure of trying to find socialization while trying to improve oneself is very hard. And I can emphasize with that, right? So for those who are trying to, thank you. And if you're here, then maybe you can make this the place where people socialize, or maybe link up with each other in a way where it brings valuable meaning, right? It isn't like just some kind of social media fad that you're trying to get onto, right? So, with all this being said, this all links to how this problem persists and even people outside of self-improvement, right? So this could be a video just about loneliness in general, but let alone when somebody is trying to pressurize themselves to become something better, you feel that impact a lot more because you're self-aware that you're lonely. That's the major difference between the people that are in this niche and the people that aren't. The people that are in the niche really understand that, okay, I'm feeling this because I am this. I have to change this so I can be better at that. This often referring to loneliness, and that being social. So that way you get an idea of what I just said. And excuse me, I gotta drink some water because I am thirsty. My throat's dry. Whew, I'm sorry about that. But so bringing loneliness to the table of conversation again is that, how do I want to say this? I want to try to figure out a way to say it with quality so that way you can understand the message that I'm trying to get across here, which is that loneliness is an epidemic which is specifically in self-improvement that causes people to deteriorate and reverse their progress at a much faster rate than it would be if someone just felt like they were going to quit. That's because loneliness is an attack against the human's natural instinct to be social creatures. It is an attack against the idea of being someone who can be the best possible version of themselves. So it's a really deadly thing, and it's something not a lot of people are talking about. They want to talk about mental health awareness, but they don't want to talk about what things to be aware of. There's a big difference, a huge difference between talking about the mental health of men specifically. Like, you'll see this, right? You'll see, oh, mental health awareness for men. Oh, yeah, we should be very careful of this of mental health because they can share and express their feelings. Like, that's not what we fucking want. We want people to recognize that, okay, loneliness is a problem in men too, right? Loneliness is a problem, and so is depression, and so is, anxiety of some sort. And give us an actual organic solution to it besides shoving pills down people's throats. stop giving us fucking ADHD medicine. We're not hyperactive. We need some social connection because everyone's so separate, right? Everyone's so far apart from each other that they can't actually connect in a way that's meaningful anymore. And let alone when they have the opportunity, they might be distracted on their phone watching this video because they think that this will help them. This won't help you. You have to actually take the action. You have to go and see the people and be like, okay, I want to talk to you because I want to create a better social connection with myself and with other people in my future. I want to provide value to others. Very simple concept. But only if you can emphasize it and apply it. And that is the part that is difficult. The implementation of being a social person is much more difficult in this modern society because of the fact that everyone's so fucking distracted. Because no one has focus, no one has presence, no one has these things that people work on in self-improvement now because they understand this lack of things. So, it's very interesting to see the developments of people and how much we don't think anymore. Because before, we were always moving towards something better. We were always, we were making the airplane, making a light bulb, making the thing, moving towards a better society. But now, since we're so comforted in the popular 4 countries, UK, Australia, Canada, United States. Wait, that's it? I say America. Hold on. America, UK, Canada, Australia. There. And it's just, the lives have been so comforting to them that they actually forgot how to be uncomfortable, right? Oh, it's hot in the car, turn on the AC. Oh, it's cold, turn on the heat. I am willing to bet you $100,000 that I don't have, that if somebody that was either born in those 4 countries, right? I would bet $100,000 that those people would not be able to live like a day in Africa. They would be crying to go home, right? And quite frankly, I might be too, because I'm a pampered bitch, right? Just like all these other people, they're all pampered bitches because they've been grown up that way. Oh, you can always have convenience and this and that and that. And that, I think, is why also the rate of people not being happy with their jobs is really increasing, because they're pampered as kids, right? You can't punish your child anymore because they can go and call CPS. Which, obviously, there's actual good cases where, like, an alcoholic father that's beating you up, like, okay, yeah, call. But, like, if, like, you could go call them and say that they slapped you for playing with someone else's toy, right? And now all of a sudden, like, they're knocking at the door and they're like, hey, we need to investigate what's going on with your child. Like, what the fuck? You can't actually teach your child to not be a pampered bitch anymore. And society has developed it through laws, not just through social construct, but through literal laws that say, hey, you can't do that. You can't grow up, you can't make your son or your daughter a disciplined person who can provide value to other people. You can't do that. So it breaks the ancestral communication of practicing these ideologies, because you don't get the... Sorry, I need water again. You don't get the bond that comes from striving over a challenge, because you can't bring them a challenge anymore. Because since humans are based on survival, right? And if their child is going to go call and perhaps get themselves away from them, like, that is death of the child in their life, right? So, what? Sorry. So why are we doing this? Why are we taking the time to not do anything about this, right? That's the problem, unfortunately. That's what I want you to take away from this. I want you to take away from this that loneliness in the form of social construct on an individual and global scale is very rapidly spreading. It is an epidemic. It is a pandemic. It is one that is unforeseen from the consequences of technology. It affects people on a physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional level deeply. And it catastrophically changes the perspective of their lives to be much worse, to be much more miserable. And it is, I believe, one of the most major reasons why you have a 60% obesity rate in Americans. The state American statistics here. Why you have 60% plus unhappy with their jobs. And why you have so many people, like, even if you go look up the statistics, like I looked up the statistics and I did like a quick search, it wasn't really too depth. Then everyone said, oh yeah, 77% of Americans are fulfilled with their lives. If they're really fulfilled, then why the fuck is it every time that I look at somebody, they're like this? They're fucking soulless. You're asking literal fucking robots who are probably just trying to get a dopamine hit off social media 5 minutes ago. Hey, is your life fulfilling? Yeah. Yeah. You barely get a fucking audible message out of them, let alone get a cohesive sentence. So that's one thing I want you to take away, is that emphasis of difficulty is no longer allowed. You'll have CPS knocking at your door if you try to do anything about it. But there is a solution, which I'll mention. Actually, yeah, I'll mention the solution right now. The solution is to discipline your people at a young age by showing them your discipline. Show them that you are very... Hope to cut this part out. Disgusting. Absolutely fucking disgusting. So, sorry, I can't remember where I cut off from, but you have to show them that you are a very disciplined person as a natural state of being. And I think what I want to do, I have a little secret plan here, which I'll reveal to you, is that when I have my kids, I think what I want to do with them is when they're like super, like when they don't remember things, I want to make them like do like kind of exercises, right? So that way it makes them like physically stronger for starters, and it'll help them increase their mind too, and it'll help them like just develop better overall. And I figure if I make them do this when they're like little kids, right? They'll kind of have the habit already down, and they'll emphasize, oh wait, I should exercise today, right now. And they just exercise. Like it's like automatic to them, right? Just like how brushing your teeth is for you, right? When you force a baby to brush their teeth, right? No, like, so someone 2 seconds ago probably just went to me and said, you're an awful human being. Why are you trying to convert your child into an exercise enthusiast? You convert your child to brush their teeth. The hell's the problem with that? Oh wait, you don't talk about the estrogens and the fluoride that you give the child, so that way when they're developing as a baby, especially as a son, they get fucked up. And it happens to women too, right? Like, you jam plastic in their fucking mouth, do this all day, you don't say nothing about it, because you don't know any better, right? So, if we know that exercise is good for someone, why don't we make them do it as a child? Simple solution to a simple problem. So, I hope that covered loneliness in a deepening way, and I hope that it provided value to you in somewhat of a okay way, right? And I'm working on my communication skills every day. So, I apologize if I make messages confusing sometimes or misconstruing, but I believe that in my future, my message will be very straightforward, very concise, very executive. So remember that. And And as always, we're here to help you help them. Peace.